Welcome back to the Get Off the Treadmill podcast for practice owners and leaders, where we are obsessed with how to build a successful practice and get a life too. Hi, I'm Chuck Blakeman, and we're going to dive into another topic that helps us make more money in less time, get off the treadmill, and rehumanize dentistry by giving everybody their brain back. Today, I'm talking with Duane Tinker. He's a nationally renowned consultant who helps dentists establish and maintain their compliance and risk management programs. Duane has inspected hundreds of dental offices and thousands of dental records, which just makes me sad because I hate this stuff, and I'm so glad he loves it. He's a subject matter expert sought by attorneys nationwide who represent dentists in civil and criminal Medicaid-related actions. Former state board investigator turned consultant, Tink applies his knowledge and experience to help dental offices make the place safer for dentists, for their patients, and for their staff. And Tink also has a podcast called Talking With The Toothcop. It's a great podcast. I've been on it, and I recommend it to everybody I know. You can find it on iTunes at dentalcompliance.com. Duane, it's a pleasure to have you on our podcast today.
Thanks for having me, Chuck. I appreciate it.
You bet, man. It's good to see your face again. It's been too long.
It has.
Yeah, well, let's jump right in. So the topic today is looking to compliance for operational efficiency. And I'm assuming we're going to scare some people a little bit today. Then we're going to help them a little bit today. So jump right in. How do we use compliance to develop operational efficiency?
You know, Chuck, that's funny you mentioned. I don't like to scare people with this compliance stuff. It is scary.
Yeah, you don't have to. It's scary all by itself.
It is. So, when the average person thinks about compliance, they feel nauseated, they want to vomit. It's like, some dentists, quite honestly, it just, frankly, it just pisses people off. The government telling me I have to do or can't do something. And so I run into a lot of resentment. I run into a wide range of emotions when I come to the topic of compliance. And I get it. I don't do compliance because I like the rules. I do it because I like dentists. So that said, I think when we change the way that we look at things, the things we look at change, right?
Yeah.
So instead of looking at this as the government says I got to do this and they're beating me over the head with something, what I have found is offices that don't have a lot of compliance functions in place, they don't have their policies and procedures, they don't have adequate staff training, that those practices generally are not as efficient as they could be. Mm-hmm. Most dentists would prefer to be working in a patient's mouth. That's what they went to school for. And by all means, that's where they should spend their time. But if we don't address compliance things, then we have to stop and deal with, government investigations, inspections, patient or employee complaints to the government, and respond to that. Sometimes those matters involve having to involve attorneys. There's almost always a loss of production at some level when we're having to stop and deal with this crap, if you will.
Yeah.
Those situations are often stressful. Whether we're talking about OSHA complaint or an OCR, HIPAA investigation, or even just your run-of-the-mill patient complaint to the dental board, where maybe somebody's unhappy when really the root of the problem has nothing to do with you, but maybe they just had a off conversation, or maybe they didn't like the hairstyle of the person at your front desk. Now they place you in a defensive position.
It's true.
The patient thinks that they got something on you. So they go out and they find some attorney to represent their interest, and that with the intent that they're going to sue you.
Yeah.
More stress on you as the dentist. And so the first thing the attorneys do is they're going to test their case before they ever try to go to a courtroom or file a suit. They file a state board complaint and then make you answer to your state dental board. And think about the stress and the distraction and of that situation. Sometimes those investigations drag on for months.
And they're going to find something
wrong. Yeah, even if you did nothing wrong, they're going to find something.
Exactly. It's their job. It's their paycheck. They have to find something.
Exactly. So, and then they come back and they find that problem. And because oftentimes some of those issues, like not having blood pressure when you should, not having a consent form, maybe you didn't have a treatment plan, maybe you didn't have a diagnostic x-ray when you should have, and bam, now you take one for a standard of care violation, and now the attorneys tested their case. Now they got a state board finding against you. Now they file their suit. So now you're dealing with a disciplinary action and the distraction related to that. Now you're having to deal with a malpractice suit, which probably won't end up in the courtroom unless they have a pretty good finding against you for a standard of care issue or some other finding that's going to be a slam dunk against you in a civil court. So,
and all of that doesn't scare people.
No, people can say that, but the average dentist, this is unnerving for them. I've had two dentists. Yeah. When I was with the dental board, I had two dentists that committed suicide.
Oh my goodness.
And I knew from my perspective, these dentists were not going to lose their license. Probably wouldn't even receive any significant disciplinary action, but they were freaking out.
Yeah. So let's put it in perspective right now. 0.4% of dental practices fail, and probably 5% of those because of a compliance issue. Most of the time, it's because they walked away from the practice or they lost their license for some reason that has to do with compliance. But it's not even a 0.5%. It's pretty hard to lose your license.
Right.
We're not saying people are going to go to end up in terrible places. What we're saying is you don't need this hassle. There's better things you can do with your time and your money and your energy than be chasing something that probably your insurance company or somebody will take care of, or it'll get nullified or something. But the headache that you get from that and the potential that gets out as dumb information that really shouldn't be out there, you just don't need that kind of nonsense. So it's not about losing your practice. It's about let's avoid heartaches. Life has enough heartaches without adding to them.
Exactly.
So how do we use compliance for operational efficiency? What are some ways that you can see that crossover? Because I think that to me is a very positive approach to this. Is we're not doing this just to keep the government off our back. If we have the right compliance things in place, you're saying it should help us with our operational efficiency. Can you give us some thoughts or some examples on that?
So we know we have to have our OSHA safety programs. We know that as employers, we're required to provide for personal protective equipment for our staff. Oftentimes staff like to give pushback. The office is too warm. They don't like wearing the clinical jackets. They don't like wearing those heavy duty gloves when they're processing instruments because they're hard to grip things. Right. They have a million other excuses about why they don't wear their equipment properly. And they think that they can just not wear it and be okay with it. The problem is when they do that and you don't jump and defend and require them to put their stuff on, then you're giving them leverage. And then, which may be all fine and dandy, but one day you have a pissed off employee and they decide, hey, I've got an opportunity. I've got some leverage on you as the doctor. And they file a complaint with the state board or OSHA. Now they tie you up in a mess and you basically have two choices. Do you plead guilty and take your spanking, or how do you handle that?
Drag it out. Yeah,
exactly. So it's not necessarily about fines and penalties. It's about reputational harm as well.
Well, one of my clients had that exact issue. He had someone that they all knew needed to go, and they knew it was going to be sensitive. It was a 6-month process, and they got her out the door in the right fashion with all the right HR boxes ticked and all that good stuff. And she went and complained to the board and said they've got compliance issues. Which, if this practice has compliance issues, I give up. But to your point, they dug and they dug and they dug and they found something.
Right.
And it was a huge hassle for them, but they got off pretty clean because they had done a lot of. Well, they'd done their work on compliance, and it didn't cost the guy who owned the practice. It was a large practice. Didn't cost him or his team a lot of time and energy because they were able to demonstrate that they had the compliance there.
Right.
They still found a little ticky-tack thing, but it basically went away. But again, you need to be in the right place because it could happen, and it's likely to happen that somebody for no good reason will go to the board, which is exactly what happened here.
Yeah. And, right, wrong, or otherwise, at the end of the day, you're still having to take time and defend yourself. And that's never the best position to be in.
Yeah.
Don't give your staff that noose to hang you with.
Right.
You know?
So what are some of the bigger things you see? What are some of the bigger compliance issues that you see need to be cleaned up first when you walk into a practice? What do you see commonly?
Uh, simple things, making sure that your license is properly posted. If you're going to use a photocopy, make sure it's a good photocopy. Yeah, when you walk into your lobby, and Dennis, take an opportunity from time to time and walk in the front door
Uh,
and see what your patients see. You'd be surprised at just how disgusting some of your lobbies are. If it gives you the willies, think what that might give to your patients. Do a walkthrough. I mean, is it clean? Does the office project a professional image? Does it smell clean? Does it feel clean? Is the staff appropriately groomed? Or, you have certain signage that needs to be displayed, your HIPAA notice,
yeah.
things like that. Those are all things that investigators and inspectors look for. Your odds of having somebody randomly walk in and inspect your office are pretty slim. Usually when it happens, it's response to a patient or an employee complaint. And believe it or not, some of the more, shall I say, just awesome cases that I've worked were not complaints from former employees, but active employees. So if you have a staff member that's disgruntled, they're voicing their concerns, take some time to listen to that. And, they're giving clues about what they're going to do, they're forecasting, and two, use it as an opportunity to address those concerns. You can prevent a lot of problems by doing that.
Awesome.
So,
What do you see as the resistance to getting this cleaned up? There's a lot of head trash that we're dealing with. I'm busy in the chair. What are some things you see that are dentists just distracted, or do they truly resist getting involved with this stuff?
I see a little bit of everything, Chuck. There's some dentists that are, very much type B. They don't want to deal with conflict.
Right.
They don't want to have to walk up to a staff member and hand them a pair of glasses or a clinical jacket. Or quite honestly, some of the dentists are scared to death of their staff. Then you've got some that, a little bit of nice goes a long ways. Some dentists kind of overcompensate by being cruel to their staff. My thought would be check yourself before you wreck yourself, kind of thing. I see that happen a lot. The other thing is be nice to your patients. Sometimes people forget that, your patients are people, and you forget to be nice to them. It's not that you're being mean. It's just you forget to be personal with them, or personable, I should say. And, that chafes people sometimes. Yeah. And those are situations. It's not even about your dentistry most of the time. When you have to deal with an issue, they just didn't feel like you were respectful to them as a person. So remember that human element, because that can alleviate a lot of problems.
Yeah, my experience with this kind of stuff is it falls in the general bucket, the general business bucket of, I'm a dentist. I don't have time or energy or desire to get involved in the business piece of this. I didn't go into dentistry to do compliance or processes or protocols or administrative or QuickBooks or any of that nonsense. Right. And yet the reality of it is, I've started, I think, 12 businesses now in 8 different industries on 4 continents. And from that experience and dealing with a lot of dentists, my bias is that the art of dentistry is about 30% of the business. And the business is the other 70%. Marketing, advertising, human resources, people relationships, training, accounting, all of the compliance. This is all, the reality of it is it's probably 70+% of the business, but we invest 98% of our time in the chair and just hope the rest of it goes well. I don't think I want to communicate to the dentist that they have to leave the chair to get this stuff done, but it has to get done. So if the dentist fairly doesn't have time or doesn't want to watch compliance, how do we make sure that it gets watched?
You have to have systems that your staff can follow, that make sense to them, and that they'll actually follow.
Yeah,
I don't like seeing the dentist as the compliance officer. You need to be working on your patient. Delegate but monitor. I like that, Ronald Reagan's saying trust but monitor.
Yeah.
Delegate to a HIPAA compliance officer, your office manager, those responsibilities. Delegate to your lead dental assistant, and then give them the time, the authority, and the resources that they need to adequately do their job. It means they may need to free up an hour or two of their schedule once a week or so they have the time to focus on that, because the time that they spend on that is time that you don't have to spend on it, but you have to know that that's covered.
Yeah.
These people, they're not, their role is to be your lifeguard. They need the time to watch your back.
Well, that's profound. It's simple but profound, because It's something we don't do well in dentistry or any other business. I had to learn this myself to actually delegate not the task, but the responsibility. And that's where we begin to feel this coming off our shoulders. Too often, even if we give somebody else the task of compliance, I feel the weight of having to actually monitor it myself on a regular basis because I haven't delegated the responsibility. And the difference is really simple in my mind. I see this across the board. It's not a compliance thing. It has to do with any kind of process, any kind of result you want in your practice. When you delegate tasks, people feel used. When you delegate responsibility, they take ownership. And so if you look at this in a simple manufacturing environment, delegating the task is put this nut on that bolt. When you do that, people just feel used and they can't wait to get out of there at 4:59. When you say make a great washing machine, and your part of that is to put this nut on the bolt, but that's not what you're doing. What you're doing is you're making a great washing machine, and you incentivize them and you help them see that they're part of something bigger than this little task that they've got going on. Your responsibility is not to put this nut on that bolt. It's to make a great washing machine and to be part of a team of people doing this. They take ownership. And so you have to communicate not just the task of compliance, but you own this.
Right.
And that's scary because as soon as I say that, I hear dentists in their head saying, but wait a minute, if they own it, then I won't know about it. Well, we talk about 3 ways that people lead, the 3 responsibilities of leadership: guard the values, champion the people, and pilot the results. And under pilot the results, you should be getting a regular report, whether it's daily, weekly, or monthly, whatever you need, that says, here's exactly what went on in the compliance process. Here's where the violations were. Here's how we fixed them. If it's daily, whatever your comfort level is, you have somebody else who's responsible and they bring you the data on a regular basis. So you're still as informed as you ever were. And if you don't like the data, if you don't like the way it's been being handled, you don't jump in and take control again. You jump in and you train and you retrain and say, no, this is how it needs to happen. Now, the next time I see the data, it needs to look like this. And so it's a process of getting it off your plate by championing the results and let them champion the process of compliance and just give you the results. I say this all the time. Managers go chase data. Leaders have the data come and find them. So that's the simple solution here, is you can still feel comfortable that you're not giving away the farm by making sure somebody else gives you the data. I've actually heard a dentist say this: I can't give someone else compliance because if we get sued, it's coming out of my pocket. I totally get that. So don't give them everything. Give them the ownership of everything, but require that they simply keep you as in the loop as you need to be so that you know that it's going the way that it's going. Because if you really believe that, you can't actually let anybody do anything in your practice. You have to do it all yourself. Yeah. Because somebody's going to do something that messes up. So you've got to get out of there at some point. But that's the way to do it, is get the reports coming to find you as often as you need them.
Chuck, I couldn't agree with you more.
Good. Well, what kind of things do you see? What kind of reporting do you see people needing when they're trying to get their cold, prying this out of their cold dead hands? What are some of the things that you feel like would give them some peace if they had that kind of reporting? So it gives them an idea of what they can ask from their staff.
I'm a big fan of using checklists. When you highlight the stuff that's a concern, and they have a report that they can hand off and say, here's everything we looked at for the week. Here's what's going on. By the way, here's a couple of concerns that we need to address and focus on. All right. So
that's a simple but very practical, powerful thing. Let's put together a checklist of all the things that need to be in compliance, maybe on a daily basis. And at the end of the day, somebody checks that off, or a weekly basis, or both. And then those are brought to the dentist with the anomalies and the exceptions, and says, and they might get a little one paragraph summary on top of that saying, please make sure you check number 14. I'm concerned about that. That's a great practical way for this to get off your plate and yet to be completely in the loop. I would feel comfortable and immediately at ease with that. Very practical, very simple little solution.
Hey, they use it in the airline. They use it in the medical profession. Why shouldn't we use it in dentistry?
That's right.
It's consistent. It gives you a consistent result, and I think that's what we're after.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's part of the process. We talk about freedom mapping all the time, and freedom mapping is one of the ways to build compliance, is figure out what it is you need to have done, have the map, and we call them freedom maps because they map your way to freedom, and they map your way, the way to freedom for your team members. They get into their highest and best use of their time and energy by doing this, but it also gives you a way of showing people exactly what they need to do in order to be compliant. It's a very simple thing to do, to map the process and to put together a checklist that comes to you as often as you need it. Well, I love it. This is sticky stuff, but we got to pay attention to it. This is the side of dentistry everybody sort of wants to turn their head away from. It's like, I don't want to go to the doctor. I'm afraid I might find out I'm sick, and I don't want to check on my compliance because I'm afraid something might be wrong. We got to get this stuff figured out, be highly transparent on it, and make sure everybody's in full compliance. And we've got a process to do this. So it's great to have people out there like you who are making this stuff happen. How can people get a hold of you and figure out how to work with you, and then tell them about your podcast a little bit as well?
Sure. The best way to get a hold of us is through our website, dentalcompliance.com. We work with offices all over the country, and everything from OSHA, HIPAA, infection control, Medicaid. We do record auditing. We're one of the few
Nice.
Organizations that I know of that does record auditing, which is great because there's no punitive action when we find something wrong. Insurance company finds a problem, they're going to be asking for money back. So
yeah,
it makes sense to find out on the front end what you could be facing. So dentalcompliance.com is the best way to get a hold of us. And our podcast, Talking with the Toothcop, there's been a lot of rules and regulations that have changed here, at least at the state level here in Texas here in the last 6 months or so, regarding sedation, safety, and whatnot. This is kind of a hot topic in dentistry in a number of different states here. So I've been focusing much of my podcast episodes here recently talking about some of these changes. What I find is that, what happens in one state eventually is going to happen in other states. In Texas, we have the most stringent regulations when it comes to nitrous oxide administration. So if you're not in Texas, you should be looking over the fence to see what's going on here, because it's coming to a state dental board near you. And it's a real eye opener.
Yeah. Well, again, it's great to have you out there doing this. If you're listening to this podcast and you're wondering if you're compliant, then you probably need to talk to Dental Compliance and talk to Duane. These are the guys who know this stuff, and they know it inside and out. Duane, it's been a pleasure to have you on today. Let's do it again.
I look forward to it. Thanks so much, Chuck.
Thanks, buddy. If this podcast was helpful, please subscribe by computer or by phone, or connect with us at www.gottsummit.com, 2 T's, G-O-T-T summit.com. That stands for Get Off the Treadmill. We have those summits quarterly for dental practitioners only. Or connect with us at www.chuckblakeman.com, or email us at grow@cranksetgroup.com. Let's get off that treadmill. Let's get into the participation age. I look forward to seeing you in the next podcast. Thanks.